Hi friends, another week and Data Platform Central is back with another useful tip. This time this is going to be an Azure Data Factory based tip. Recently there was a new type of copy task which was introduced in Azure Data Factory. This variant is known as Metadata-driven copy task. This new type of copy task has the ability to make flexible copy activities. The metadata-driven copy task makes use of an external control database through which we can control which all objects needs to be copied from a source system to a destination system. At the time of creating this video, the metadata-driven copy task will only support copying multiple objects from a single source to a single destination. So in case your actual use case consists of objects which are coming from more than one source systems, please keep in mind that you have to create a separate metadata-driven copy task which points to each one of your sources. So let's go straight to the demo and look at how this metadata-driven copy task works and what exactly happens on a background. To start off, I have set up Azure SQL Server database instance where I have set up two databases. One is going to be the destination database where we are going to copy all our objects along with the data, and I have also set another database which will be used for storing the control activity of this metadata driven copy task. So whenever metadata driven copy task is used, it requires an external database where you need to maintain the control data, and this will be in the form of a table which has some predefined columns and whose values needs to be passed through a particular format. So now that we have set both the databases here, I am going to copy the data which I have in one of my on-premise SQL Server database onto this ADF destination database which is set up inside Azure. So this in your actual use case will be like migrating a lot of objects from one of your on-premise databases to the corresponding cloud database. So here how we can make use of this metadata driven copy task for achieving this. So here, because of this metadata driven approach, we just need to create a single copy data task for copying all the tables, and we can add the flexibility by specifying the tables at runtime by updating the control table. So let's see how we can do that. To start off, let's first go to the de facto development tool for Azure Data Factory, which is nothing but our Azure Data Factory Studio. So I'm inside in my Azure Data Factory account. I have gone to the Azure Data Factory Studio, and this is the home page of your Azure Data Factory Studio. When you just go in, you will be greeted with this wonderful home screen which has these options for ingestion, orchestration, transformation and configuration of SSIS. So here we are going to just ingest some data. So of course copy data can be found within this ingest option. So click on the ingest option and just continue, and immediately you will be provided with the new screen which will have two options. One will be your built-in copy task, which is same as the default copy task we used to use for all our activities so far, and we have one additional option now available which is known as the metadata driven copy task, and this is still in preview. So it's a new feature that is being introduced in your Azure Data Factory. So this is what we will be using today for playing with our demonstration. And as we already discussed, this requires the use of a control table which will be residing inside an external database. So automatically, if you see there is a property which is available which is known as the control table data store. So this is the database which stores the control table, where you need to specify what all tables to be included for the main copy activity. So here we are going to, because I have already set up the database for this, we will be using that database and we will be creating the linked service to that database so as to use it for our control activities. So you can click on new option. As you create with any other database, you are going to create a linked service here, and there are multiple options of what you can use for your control database. You can use a Amazon RDS based SQL Server or Azure SQL database, or it can be Azure SQL Managed Instance, Synapse Analytics or SQL Server. So at this point, every one of these products which are supported for this control table would be on cloud except SQL Server. All the others are the cloud products. So here we are going to use Azure SQL database as the option, but you can use any one of these options for storing the control data. And just pointing to my Azure subscription and the server name, and the database name. So we have three databases here, and one is the master database which comes by default, and then I have the destination and the control table. So for this purpose I am going to use the control table, because this is for creating the control table. And of course I have the username and the password set up, so I'll pass the username and the password, and we can do a test connection to make sure that our Azure SQL Server connection is working fine. So the connection is now successful, so you can click on create, and automatically the connection to your control table based database would be ready. So now if you see, it automatically tries to name the control table based on the package name. What you can do is, like, you can name it yourself. So I'm going to just name it like main control table, and you can pass a corresponding schema name. I'm just putting it under DBA. You can use any schema name. If you have a separate schema created for control objects, you can use that. And of course create new table should be clicked, because the table doesn't exist. In case the table already exists, you don't have to check this, so that it will just point to the same table and store the property values inside that. So anyone who has worked on SSIS, if you remember how we used to do the dynamic configurations by storing the configuration values in SQL Server table, this is something similar to that. So, and now how you want to run it, whether we want to schedule it, whether we want to run once now, or whether we want to use a tumbling window event. So here we are just going to use it run once, because it's a demonstration, so I will be choosing run once, and click on the next option, and now this gives you the screen to and the connection to your source. So in this case the source is going to be a SQL Server. Select the SQL Server and connection. You can click on new connection, because it's a SQL Server. You need to connect to the integration runtime corresponding to that. So I have already created an integration runtime which will connect to my SQL Server. So for passing the server name, you can go to your management studio and get the instance name from there. And for the database name, you need to fill in your database name. So the database name would be, this is where I have all my source objects. From here we are going to pull all the objects along with the data to your Azure SQL database. And username you can fill in, and the password. Again, you can do a test connection to make sure that the connection to your on-premise SQL Server instance, from where the source objects are going to come, is successful. So once it's successful, click on create, so that the connection will get created. Automatically it will show you the list of the tables. So the connection is successful, and automatically it will provide you with the list of the tables from which you need to select your tables. So I am going to select all the tables which are under sales schema. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in one shot, all these tables are going to be migrated, or all the data from these tables are going to be copied from your SQL Server instance to the Azure database instance, and it will be automatically copied. So here you will get an option on how you want to control the loading behavior. There are two loading behaviors. One will be the full load, another one will be the delta load. So yeah, you can either set the same option for all the tables, or you can select like configure each table individually. So I am going to configure each of the table individually, because some of these tables are dimension tables which can be full loaded always, but some of them are like transaction tables which needs to be loaded incrementally, because the data volume will also be high. So here if you see, customers is a dimension table, so I can keep it full load. Order items is indeed a transaction table, but I can't use delta load in this case, because it doesn't have a watermark column. Because if you want to use delta load, it needs to have a watermark column. Because I don't have anyone inside that, I am going to use full load itself. For the orders, I am going to choose delta load, because it has a watermark column. So order date, it really depends on, ideally all your transaction tables will have a watermark column. So here in this case it doesn't have it, so I am just full loading it. So here you can select the watermark column. I am selecting order date as the watermark column, and I need to set a start date. You can just select any date and make it, that will be easier. So here I am going to set it to 1/1/2016, because I know that my data starts from 1/1/2016. So based on your actual use case, you can set a corresponding date. So this will be the starting date from which it starts the processing, when it does the incremental loading. Now if you want to see the data, you can click on preview data. It will show you a nice preview of the data as well. You can do it for all the tables if you want. So once you are happy with the data, you can go and check the next one. That's also full load. If you want to see a preview, you can click on the preview. It will show you the preview of the data as it comes from your source. Staff rating doesn't have any data, so if you want, you can go back and remove it, and you can come back and check the ones which have data. So staff does have data, and it is going to be a full load as well. So once you have seen a preview of all the data and you are happy, you can now go with the next step. and here we need to select the destination. So this will be the database to which all these tables along with the data will be copied. So here, as we discussed earlier, we will be copying to Azure SQL database. So you can select Azure SQL and it will show you the Azure SQL option, and you can create a new connection. So here you can go to the Azure subscription. Only difference will be it will be a different database now. Instead of the control table database, we will select the other database, which is ADF destination. And for the username, we will create the SQL admin user, which is the cloud user, and the password. And click on test connection. Make sure that the connection to the database succeeds, and click on create. So now that you have created the connection to the source and the destination, the next step would be to map between the destination and the source tables. Automatically it creates the mapping by default, and it automatically gives you the option to auto create the tables. Because we are doing it for the first time, we can go ahead with that. In case you already have those tables, you can click on the use existing table and map it accordingly. In this case, we don't have to do that because we are auto creating it. Now if you want to skip the column mapping, you can click on skip column mapping. If not, you can keep it unchecked, and when you go to the next step, it will automatically show you the column mappings that it created. So if you see, it nicely maps all the columns as it is coming from your source to the destination. So if you want to remove anything, you can remove it at this stage, or if you want to retain everything, you can retain it. So because this is just a demo, I am just retaining it, and click on next. And if you want to name your task, I can say name it like SQL Server to Azure table copy. You can name anything based on your convenience, and you can also set the number of concurrent copy tasks. So what it does is that based on the processor availability and based on the setting, it will try to execute the number of tasks that you have set in parallel. So maximum, if you see that you have set like 4 tasks, it will maximum executes 4 tasks in parallel. Because it is trying to copy data across multiple objects, it will try to parallelize the execution wherever possible. So you can set the limit like this, or you can leave it auto, so that based on your actual compute environment availability, it will automatically determine the number of tasks to be executed. And if you want to change any of the advanced settings, you can change it. So here I am not going to change any one of them, I am keeping it as it is. Let's go to the next one. So this gives you the summary of what you did. So if you go to the items, it will clearly show what all tables you have included as a part of your copy activity. So now click on next. And this is a final step. Please keep in mind that this will not execute the package. This will generate the SQL script for you. So if you see, what it does is that it will generate the SQL scripts based on the metadata that you have selected. So based on the number of tables you have selected and based on the columns that you have selected, it will automatically generate the SQL scripts for you, and then it will provide you with a button to download your SQL script. So click on download SQL script. Automatically it will get downloaded to the machine. Now you need to go, and there will be 2 SQL scripts within this. One will be for creating the control table and populating it with the details of all the objects that you have set inside. And second will be the cases where you have a delta load. It will have a store procedure where it will automatically update the delta load, the watermark column value based on the data that it pulled. So when you do an incremental load, after every incremental load, it needs to put the reference date or the maximum date until which it has done the processing, so that next time when you run it, it needs to start from that date onwards. So this logic will be automatically updated through a procedure, and that procedure also will be given as a generated script to you by this package. So if you, now that you have clicked on download, if you go to the download option, you can see 2 files. So you can see these 2 files. One is the create control table and second one is the create store procedure. So what you can do is like you can drag and drop both of them to your SQL management studio. So if you see this, one of them will contain the create table and another one will contain the create procedure. So now what you need to do is like you need to connect to the database where you want to execute this, and this needs to be executed to your control database. Copy the create table statement to a new window after connecting to your control database and click on execute. So it will execute and populate the table. So in this case we are having 5 rows for each of the tables, and similarly you need to now copy the create procedure and in a new window connecting to the same control database, we need to execute it. So if you see that update statement, you can see that it is actually updating the watermark column start value, so as to use it for the as the reference value for the subsequent runs. So now that you have created the control objects, let's now come back, and now if you see, there is a button here, view pipeline and debug pipeline run. So you can click on view pipeline, debug pipeline run. It will take you to the pipeline that was automatically created by your metadata driven copy task. So this is your folder which was created by SQL Server to Azure tables copy. This was the metadata driven copy task related pipeline. So it creates 3 pipelines on the background. If you see, one will be the top level pipeline, the next one will be the middle level pipeline, and then there will be the bottom level pipeline, and everything inside this will be perfectly dynamic, and it all depends on what you have set inside your control table. So if you just look at the top level pipeline, you can see that it first gets number of objects to be copied. That depends on your setting as well. So you have 3 settings here which you will be setting through the parameters: maximum number of objects returned, maximum number of concurrent tasks, and main control table name. If you want to change it at runtime also, that is also possible. You can change it and execute it. So it will get the total number. Based on that, it will call a for each loop for iterating through each number of batches, and then within that it will call another pipeline which is your middle level pipeline. Double click on it, it will take you inside the middle level pipeline, and from there it will actually divide one batch into multiple group. It will divide it into batches, and for each of those batches, if you go inside, it will try to find out what are the objects involved within each batch, and then for each of those batches it will call the last pipeline which will be your bottom level pipeline. That will again have another for loop which will iterate through each one of those objects which are included within the batch group, and for each of the batches it will then look at whether it needs to be full loaded or delta loaded or the default one. Based on that, it will go to the corresponding task and it will perform that particular copy task. So you don't need to really worry about these tasks, but just for understanding, this is what happens, and every one of these values you are setting inside can be configured from outside. So you can configure what tables to be copied to, what are the columns to be mapped. All these things can be configured from your control table itself. So once you create this package, you don't have to come back to package for doing any changes. So now that we have created the package, now let's try running it first in a debug mode, so that we'll see how it works. So here it asks what is the objects per group to copy. So I'll go to the always start from the top level. That's the level from which it needs to start execution. So go to the add trigger and click on trigger now to start the execution. This will ask you like how many objects to be returned. We can, so this is the default value 5000. In this case we don't have that much of objects, so you can say like say 5 objects. Number of concurrent tasks, you can say 2 tasks, and we are not going to change the main control table name. Let it be like that. So I'm clicking on OK, and it will start executing using these values. So now at the end of this execution, if you go back and check the Azure database, so currently it is empty. If you see the destination database, it doesn't have any tables. You can go to the monitor tab and start checking that executions. After a while, if you see, you can see that the first batch has now succeeded. It is now continuing with the second batch. So now all the batches has now succeeded. Now if you go and check, you should see all the objects in your Azure database. As you see now, all the tables have appeared here, all the sales related tables. Now if you open any one of them, you can see the data as well. So as you see, the data has now also appeared. So your metadata driven copy task has worked well. Now what you need to do is like how you can do the modifications. That also can be done directly from ADF itself. All you need to do is like, now you have only included sales related tables. Now what if we need to include more tables, or you want to remove a few tables? What you need to do is like, you can go back and in your Azure Data Factory, you have the top level pipeline. When you click on the ellipsis near to that, there is an option to edit control table. Click on edit control table. It will again ask you to modify the scripts. So here it will automatically show you the script for fetching the data from your control table, because you are basically trying to modify the control table contents. So click on next. So based on the current selection, it will show you all the tables which are currently included. Now you want to include the production related tables as well. So what you need to do is like, first you need to uncheck show all selected items, so that it will show all the tables in that, and you need to select the additional tables. So here you need to select production.brands, categories, products and stocks. So now we have included the production tables also in addition to the sales tables. Now you can click on next, and it will automatically ask you for what option to be followed. It will all be full load options. Again, this will be a repetition of the steps that we did in the last case. Now it will ask you like the mappings, and it will again auto map it, and if you want to change it, you can change it at this point. And wherever there is a auto create, you need to map it to the existing table, because the table is already existing now, so you can't now auto map it. So you need to use the existing table option, otherwise it will throw an error. So now that all the tables are now correctly mapped, you can click on next. Again, if you want to map it, you can map it, or you can just leave it with the default mappings, and again it will show you the summary, and you can check the number of tables included. Click on next, and now again it will give you the SQL script. If you see this SQL script, this will contain the script to undo the changes that you have done already and modify the new settings. So you can download the script and see it says update. Drag and drop that update into a new window, paste this and run, so that your existing control table contents will get modified with this new contents. It automatically modified the existing ones and then it inserted the new ones as well. So now if you go and execute it, you will be able to see the new tables as well. So again, go to view pipeline and debug pipeline run, and you can go to the top level and you can trigger. Now if you see, you will be able to see the production tables as well. So after a while you will see that all the tasks are now succeeded. So that means all the pipelines were success. Now if you go back and check again your Azure database, you should see the new tables as well. So as you see, you can see the production tables as well. So you can go to one of the tables and check whether there is a data. As you see, the data has now come and successfully loaded into your Azure SQL database. So the advantage of this metadata driven copy task is that you have created a very generic copy task, and all you are controlling is through this control tables. Anytime you want to remove a table or add an additional table, all you need to do is like just modify the property values which are already being stored in the table. So this is a very convenient mechanism which can be used even by people who don't have much idea on SQL coding, because all they require is just generate the script as it is from ADF and apply directly coming to your control database. So all you need to do is like just set up a control database and a table using the scripts that the ADF provides. So using this, the developer effort will be reduced to a much lower level when you are working with cases like this, where you want to copy a set of objects from a source system to a destination system, and you want to control at runtime what objects needs to be copied and what columns needs to be mapped. Hope you enjoyed this quick demo on how you can copy a set of objects from a source to a destination using the new metadata driven copy task. The advantage of this method is that you have the flexibility of changing the number of objects to be affected as well as the mapping properties from outside the package. All you need to do is a simple SQL modify statement which targets the control table, and you will be able to control the number of objects to be copied as well as the column mapping, etc. As usual, let me know your comments. Feel free to follow my channel and subscribe to get notifications on useful tips like this in future. Click on the bell icon to get notifications. Thanks all. Meet you soon with another useful quick tip. Till then, bye.